The rain over Brookline thinned to a slow drizzle by 9:30. The iron gate at Heath Hill Road stood closed, a brass plaque reading, "Private residence, no soliciting." Inside, a chandelier the size of a small car burned over a hallway nobody ever walked. Hollis Whitfield, 52 years old, founder of Whitfield Atlantic, stood in the doorway in a navy robe, looking down at a 14-year-old girl who had walked 7 miles from Roxbury. Her name was Imani Sawyer. The babies in her arms were Eli, wrapped in blue, and Esther, wrapped in pink, 9 months old. Both had stopped crying a long time ago. Imani's eyes were wet, but her voice did not shake. "I'm only asking for food." If a child knocked on your door tonight, would you know what to do? Most people don't. Subscribe to Billionairtales. These are the stories that teach you. Hollis did not answer. He did not move. Hi, viewers. What would you have done if you opened your door and saw what Hollis saw? Type your honest answer in the comments before we continue. I want to know. Behind him, Vivian appeared in the hallway, her phone already in her hand. "Hollis, the sign is right there. Close the door." Hollis's hand tightened on the doorframe. He did not close it. He did not open it. He stood there undecided while the rain kept falling and both babies stayed quiet. Tell me in the comments, would you have let her in? Hollis stepped aside. Vivian's mouth opened, then closed. She watched her husband let 2 strangers and 2 infants cross the threshold of a house she had spent 11 years deciding who belonged inside. Imani moved like someone who had been told all her life not to touch anything in places like this. She slipped her shoes off without being asked. She held the babies tighter so the blankets would not brush the wall. The foyer light was warmer than any light she had stood under in a long time. Hollis led her to the kitchen. He pulled a small saucepan from a cabinet, filled it with milk, and set it on a low flame. He moved the way men move when they have not made their own food in years and are pretending otherwise. Vivian stood at the doorway with her arms folded, watching the back of his head as if she were trying to recognize him. Imani sat on the edge of a stool with both babies in her lap. Eli stirred. Esther did not. When Hollis set a bowl of soup in front of her, she shook her head. "They eat first." "You eat too," Hollis said. "If you only have enough for one of them," she said quietly, "give it to Esther. She's smaller." Vivian looked away. She walked to a drawer, took out a clean napkin, and began wrapping a piece of bread without explaining why. Hollis warmed a bottle for each twin. He handed the first one to Imani. As she took it, he asked, almost as an afterthought, "What's your last name, sweetheart?" She fed Esther a slow sip. "Sawyer." Hollis stopped, just for a half second. The name landed somewhere in him that he could not locate. Not a memory, not exactly, more like a folder he had walked past in a long hallway years ago. He could not place it. He moved on. Vivian did not notice. Imani did not notice. The audience saw it, and the name kept burning, quietly, in a man who did not yet know why. Hollis's phone rang while Esther was finishing the bottle. He stepped into the next room to answer it. Imani heard half of what he said, and her body went still on the stool. Yes, she's here. Both of them are here. They're safe. When? A long pause. Understood. I'll bring her in. He came back into the kitchen with his face tight. "That was Brigham and Women's. Your grandmother is being moved to the ICU. They need a guardian on the file by morning, or the hospital is required to call social services." Imani slid off the stool before he finished the sentence. Esther almost slipped. Vivian caught the blanket. "I have to go," Imani said. "I have to go now." "We'll drive you," Vivian said. The words came out of her mouth before she could pull them back. Hollis turned and looked at his wife as if he were meeting her for the first time. She did not meet his eyes. She walked past him to the staircase. 5 minutes. I need to change." Imani stood alone in the kitchen for 30 seconds. Her gaze drifted to the wall where a framed photograph showed Hollis and Vivian in dark clothes, flanking a young woman in a graduation robe. Imani looked at the young woman's face. Then she looked at Esther. She did not say anything. "Drop a comment and tell me what country you are watching this from tonight. I read every single one, and the answers always surprise me." The garage door opened. Headlights swept across the brass plaque at the gate. 4 people pulled out of Heath Hill Road in a black SUV, headed for a hospital where a folder had been waiting for 3 years to be opened by the wrong man. The drive to Brigham and Women's should have taken 20 minutes. It did not. The SUV moved through wet streets that glittered under sodium lights. Vivian sat in the back beside Imani, leaving the front seat empty. Hollis drove with both hands on the wheel and did not speak. Imani stared out the window at storefronts she had never seen from the inside. Eli was warm against her chest. Esther was warm against her arm. 8 minutes in, Eli's breathing changed. It was a small thing at first, a hitch, a pause, then a rattle that did not sound like a baby. Imani's spine straightened. She pulled the blanket back from his face. His eyes were half open. They were not focused on anything. "Eli?" Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "Eli, baby?" Vivian leaned over. She did not ask permission. She put 2 fingers against the boy's neck, then pressed her palm against his forehead. Her face changed. "Hollis, pull over now." "What's wrong?" "He's dehydrated. Bad. He needs a hospital this minute." "We're 9 minutes out." "He doesn't have 9 minutes. Call ahead." Hollis already had the phone in his hand. He pressed a number not labeled in any contact list a normal person would carry. "This is Whitfield. I need a pediatric ER bed at Brigham. Name on it before I'm through the doors. 9 months old, male, presenting with severe dehydration. Yes, now." He hung up. He pressed the accelerator. In the back seat, Vivian was already peeling Eli's blanket open, talking to him in a voice Imani had not yet heard her use. "Stay with us, baby. Stay with Auntie. You're all right. You're all right." This is what wealth looks like when it remembers it was supposed to help. Subscribe to Billionairtales. These are the stories no one else is telling you. The SUV took the corner onto Francis Street at 40 miles an hour. The hospital sign was already in view. A nurse was already standing at the ER entrance with a wheeled bassinet beside her, watching the road for headlights that hadn't arrived yet. Eli was inside the building before Imani could explain who he was. The nurse took him from her arms with a calm Imani would never forget. Vivian stayed at her shoulder. Hollis spoke to a second nurse at the desk in a low voice. Within 90 seconds, a doctor was bent over Eli with a clipboard and an IV line, and Imani was sitting in a plastic chair against the wall with Esther asleep in her lap. Finally allowed to be a child for 1 minute. Finally allowed to cry. She cried without making any sound. Vivian sat beside her and put one hand on her shoulder and did not move it. A second nurse came over with a tablet. "Sweetheart, I need the baby's birth records to match them to your grandmother's file. Do you have anything on you?" Imani nodded. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat with her free hand and pulled out a folded clinic card, worn soft at the creases, smudged at the edges, the kind of paper that had been carried for 9 months without ever being thrown away. She handed it to the nurse. Hollis was standing close enough to see the card pass between them, close enough to read the printed line at the top. He read it once. He read it again. He did not move. Vivian, watching his face change, said his name. He did not answer. Something in the room had shifted, and only one person in it knew what had shifted, and he was the man who had just stopped breathing. The name on the card was Imani Sawyer. Hollis read it a third time. The letters did not rearrange. The name did not become a different name. He stood very still in the corridor outside the pediatric ER while a nurse 2 feet away kept talking about insurance verification, and for a long moment he could not hear her because his head had become a room he had not entered in 3 years. A boardroom. the long glass table in the Whitfield Atlantic Tower. A slide projected on the wall, the title of which he could now see in his memory as clearly as if he were standing in front of it. Maternal Care Cost Containment, Q1. A voice from the head of the table, his own legal counsel, the one he had just promoted that quarter, saying, "All in favor?" Hands had gone up around the table. Hollis's hand had been among them. He had not read the file. He had been told the language was tightening medical necessity criteria for high-risk maternal care under the bronze and silver tiers. He had been told it would save the company $14 million in projected annual claims. He had said the word approved and moved on to the next agenda item, which had been a real estate question about the new corporate campus in Waltham. He came back to the corridor. The nurse was looking at him. "Mr. Hollis? Sir?" "Give me a minute." He turned and walked. Vivian saw him go. She handed Esther carefully to Imani, kissed the top of the baby's head, and followed her husband down the hallway without saying anything to anyone. She caught up with him near a window at the end of the corridor. He was leaning against the wall with one hand pressed flat against the glass. "Hollis, 3 years ago," he said without looking at her, "my company killed a woman named Imani Sawyer. Her daughter is sitting in that waiting room with the twins my policy was supposed to make sure she could afford to deliver." Vivian did not speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was very quiet. "Did you know?" Hollis closed his eyes. "I never read the file. Every policy in this country has a body count somebody forgot to read. Subscribe, so the next one isn't yours." Down the corridor, Imani sat with Esther in her arms, watching the doors of the pediatric ER, waiting to be told whether her brother would live through the night. She did not yet know the man who had brought her here was the man whose name was on the document that killed her mother. She did not yet know, but she was about to. Elias stabilized at 20 past midnight. The doctor used the word responsive, then the word lucky, then a word Hollis did not catch because he had stopped listening after the first two. Imani sat beside the bassinet in the pediatric room and watched her brother's chest rise and fall under a thin blanket, and she did not look up when Hollis stepped in to tell her arrangements had been made. A private room had been booked for Delphine on the cardiac floor. 2 cots had been wheeled in for Imani and Esther. A security detail had been placed quietly at the corridor entrance, not because anyone was coming for them, but because Hollis Whitfield had learned a long time ago that money worked best when it was already standing in the doorway before a problem walked in. He told Imani none of that. He told her only that she could sleep and that he would be back in the morning. She nodded without looking at him. He did not ask her permission to leave. He did not ask her anything. The drive back to Brookline was silent. Vivian did not turn on the radio. Hollis did not turn on the heat. The dashboard glowed blue across both their faces, and they did not speak for 9 miles. The kitchen at 3 a.m. looked the same as it had at 9 p.m., except for the small bowl of half-finished soup on the counter and the napkin Vivian had wrapped a piece of bread inside, which was still sitting where she had left it. Hollis sat down at the marble island. He put both hands flat on the stone. He did not move for a long time. Vivian poured 2 glasses of water. She set one in front of him. She sat across from him and waited until he met her eyes. "What else," she said, "have you signed off on without reading?" He could not answer. "Hollis, I don't know." That is not an acceptable answer for the man I married. He looked down at his hands. The skin across his knuckles was older than he remembered it being. He did not know when his hands had become his father's hands. "I built that company on quarterly numbers," he said. "I read summaries. I trusted my legal team. I trusted the actuaries. Stop." He stopped. "You have to fix this," she said. "Not the bill, not the funeral, not the twins. The policy, the whole policy. You have to walk into your own boardroom in the morning and end it, and you have to do it on the record. Every policy in this country has a body count someone forgot to read. Subscribe to Billionairtales so the next one isn't yours." Hollis nodded once, slowly. He did not speak. Outside the kitchen window, a thin gray was beginning to rise behind the line of trees at the edge of the property. He had 4 hours before sunrise. He had 5 hours before the boardroom doors opened. He had no idea what he was going to say when he got there. He slept for 40 minutes. He did not remember lying down. By 6 a.m., he was in his home office with a yellow legal pad and a pen that had been a gift from his father at his college graduation. He did not type the letter. He wrote it by hand. 3 pages. He crossed nothing out. He wrote it the way men write things they intend to read aloud to people who have known them for 20 years and are about to find out they did not know him. Vivian brought him coffee at 6:40. She did not read the pages. She did not ask to. She put the cup down beside his elbow, kissed the top of his head once, and left him alone. At 7, he showered. At 7:30, he put on a navy suit. At 7:45, he drove to Brigham and Women's alone. Delphine Sawyer was awake when he arrived. She was a small woman with iron in her shoulders and a wedding ring she had not taken off in 31 years. Imani sat at her bedside with Esther on her lap. Eli was asleep in a bassinet by the window, an IV line still threading into his small arm. Hollis stood in the doorway. He did not come in. "Mrs. Sawyer," he said, "my name is Hollis Whitfield. I am the founder of Whitfield Atlantic. I need to tell you and your granddaughter something before I go anywhere else this morning." Delphine looked at him for a long time. Then she gestured, slowly, to the chair beside her bed. He sat down. Vivian was not with him. He had asked her to stay home. He had wanted to do this without anyone else in the room. He told them. He told them about the policy. He told them about the $14 million. He told them about the slide, and the hands going up around the table, and the file he had never opened. He told them his name had been on the document that meant Naomi Sawyer could not get the specialist who would have kept her alive. He did not ask for forgiveness. He said the word responsible twice. He said the word sorry once, and he said it carefully, the way a man says it when he knows the word is too small for what he has done. When he finished, Delphine was quiet for a long time. Imani looked down at Esther. Then she looked at Hollis. Her voice was steady. "My mama," she said, "would want you to read the file this time." Hollis nodded. He stood up. He kissed the top of Delphine's hand, the way men of his father's generation had once done. He walked out of the room. He drove to the Whitfield Atlantic Tower in downtown Boston with 3 handwritten pages on the seat beside him. 11 men and women were already seated around the long glass table on the 42nd floor. None of them knew yet what was about to happen. The 42nd floor of the Whitfield Atlantic Tower had a view of Boston Harbor that Hollis had been told, at the ribbon cutting 9 years earlier, was worth $80,000 a square foot. He had not looked at it once that morning. 11 board members sat around the glass table. Reeve Calloway, the company's chief financial officer, sat at Hollis's right hand. Reeve was 61 years old, the son of a Hartford insurance dynasty, and had been with Whitfield Atlantic since the second funding round. He held a leather portfolio in his lap and a quiet certainty in his face that this was a normal Tuesday meeting. Hollis stood at the head of the table. He did not sit down. He took the 3 handwritten pages out of his jacket pocket and read them aloud. He named the policy. He named the dates. He named the $14 million in projected savings. He named the bronze and silver tier maternal care plans. He named the medical necessity language. He named the legal team that had drafted it. When he finished reading, the room was silent for 9 seconds. Then Reeve Calloway set his portfolio on the table. "Hollis," he said gently, "you've had a hard night. We can all see that. But what you are proposing is not a corrective action. It is a confession. There's a difference, and one of them ends this company." A vice president on Hollis's left cleared her throat. Another opened a folder she had clearly been told to bring. A projection appeared on the screen at the end of the room. Legal exposure analysis, market value impact, reinsurance complications. The presentation took 17 minutes. Hollis did not interrupt it. When the vote was called, 4 hands went up for the rescission. 7 did not. Reeve Calloway leaned forward. His voice did not rise. "You can grieve in your own time, Hollis. We have shareholders." Hollis looked at him for a long moment. He picked up his 3 handwritten pages. He folded them once. He walked out of the boardroom without saying another word. The board took it as resignation in spirit. They were wrong. If you're watching this and have not subscribed yet, drop a comment below and tell me why. Tell me what is holding you back. I want to know. Hollis did not go home. He went down 2 floors. He walked into the office of the company's head of legal affairs, a woman named Marlo Hadley, and he closed the door behind him. "Marlo," he said, "what happens if the founder of this company unilaterally publishes our internal policy revisions to a state Senate committee?" Marlo Hadley looked at him for a long moment. Then she set down her pen. "You are about to start a war." "Yes," Hollis said, "I know." 3 weeks later, the Massachusetts State Senate Committee on Healthcare Financing convened on the 2nd floor of the State House on Beacon Hill at 10 a.m. in the morning. The gallery was full. Reporters from the Boston Globe, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press. 3 different cable networks, state senators leaning forward in their chairs. And in the back row, quiet, holding Esther in her lap with Eli asleep against her shoulder, sat Imani Sawyer. Hollis Whitfield walked into the chamber alone. His board had refused to send legal representation. His communications office had submitted their resignations the previous Friday. Reeve Calloway had filed a motion to remove him as chairman, which would be heard the following month. None of that was in the chamber with him. Only Hollis. Only the testimony. He sat at the witness table. He raised his right hand. He swore an oath. He did not read from a prepared statement because he had decided 2 days ago that whatever came out of his mouth in that room had to be his own voice, or it would not be worth the chair he was sitting on. He testified for 43 minutes. He named the policy revision. He named the date it was approved. He named the $14 million in projected savings. He named the bronze and silver tier maternal care plans. He named the medical necessity language. He named the legal team that had drafted it. Named the actuarial firm that had modeled it. And then, with the cameras still running and the senators still leaning forward, he named Imani Sawyer. He said, "I did not read the file. I am responsible for what was in it." The room went silent in the way rooms become silent when a powerful man tells the truth on himself. The medical necessity language was rescinded by emergency vote 9 days later. Reeve Calloway resigned the morning the vote went through. The refund program was announced 6 months after that, covering 1,403 families across New England who had been denied care under the revised criteria between 2023 and the testimony. Whitfield Atlantic lost $48 million in market value the day Hollis testified, and he did not blink at the number. Imani Sawyer turned 15 that December. Delphine recovered. The twins took their first steps in a sunlit kitchen in Brookline, with one woman teaching them to clap and another woman teaching them their names. Hollis was reading a file at the counter, the way he had not read one in 26 years, with a yellow legal pad open beside him and a pen that had been a gift from his father. The porch light at the end of Heath Hill Road stayed on every night. Some debts cannot be paid back to the person who is owed. They can only be paid forward to the next family the system was about to forget. That is the only kind of justice that lasts. The next family this happens to could be yours. Subscribe before you need to.